Hello everyone, this is John. Welcome to our weekly show, The Subcontinent. We are here to bring light to some of the most important issues affecting the region. Along with an in-depth analysis of the topics and perspectives from regional and international experts, we shall review what key players think and what the common people have to say.
In this edition of The Subcontinent, we will be looking into how entertainment media in India negatively portrays Muslims and how it reinforces stereotypes against them. And we shall investigate the role of Hollywood and politicians in making this possible.
Poor people from slum areas with long beards, traditional desi shalwar kameez on the body and white caps on the head. This is traditionally how Muslims are shown in Bollywood movies. If this is not enough, movie makers even throw in suicide jackets and weapons like AK-47 with this Muslim look to show them as angry villains in movies. The ongoing rhetoric and violence against Muslims instigated by Hindu nationalist right-wing groups and BJP leaders has swept into Bollywood.
Bollywood's dream machine is robust and can transport the viewer to a fascinating world that is fantastic yet curiously believable. Today, the tone of Bollywood has changed drastically. Indian cinema has gone through various phases throughout its history. However, a bizarre obsession has cropped up involving Islamophobia in Bollywood. Various themes like vicious meat chomping and dark makeup have become familiar standards for Muslim characters. Bollywood sells what is bought by its large viewership, often including flimsy portrayal of women, casteism and Islamophobia, just to name a few. Constantly repeated, these stereotypes manipulate viewers' thoughts and feelings, conditioning them to ratchet up the forces of rage and unreason, and even persecution. The film industry as a genre of the entertainment industry in India is promoting and propagating the idea of Muslims as the other and the protagonist portrayed as the hero Hindu who can do no wrong. These cues are shaping public view and setting the groundwork for social acceptance of a political agenda set by the far-right government of Narendra Modi and BJP. These representations begin to solidify as they are repeated and consumed with wide acceptance in popular culture, consequently creating an othering of Muslims within a society which they are also a part of through Islamophobia.
Indian politicians and right-wing groups have a major role in all of this, but they are not the only culprits. Hollywood is known for starting this trend, and because Bollywood movies often try to copy the themes and plots of the Western film industry, they were influenced by Hollywood into following the same racist, discriminatory narrative. This shows the hegemonic nature of the United States of America and how its corruption has a trickle-down effect even in the global entertainment industry.
The biggest 2018 Bollywood hit, Padmavat, portrays an arrogant Muslim ruler swimming on his evil schemes, who oppresses his wife and lusts for other women. Other films show Muslims as apologists who must prove their loyalty and patriotism to India, such as Sarfaroush or Ma Touche Salam, reflecting a thinly veiled bias about the Muslim community being essentially bad and untrustworthy. Bollywood has been closely emulating Hollywood trends of misrepresenting Muslims in cinema since the September 11 attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City. In Hollywood films, as the Cold War ended and USSR collapsed, Hollywood had no other option but to retire the communist villain and look for a replacement. The replacement, the Arab-Muslim villain, a race they had anyways been stereotyping since over a century. After the opening of the Bollywood's market to American companies in 1991 and the declaration of Bollywood as an industry by the government in 1998, Bollywood started catering to an aspirational middle class, and soon the characters of the harmless and benevolent Muslim neighbors or friends were erased from the silver screen. Bollywood began imitating Hollywood in demonizing the Muslim by making them felons against India.
To have more on this issue, we have Dr. Ashok Swain, who is a professor of peace and conflict research at Uppsala University. Dr. Swain, nice to have you back on the show. Do you think Islamophobia is a good expression to describe what we are witnessing in India today? Shouldn't we simply talk of discrimination or intolerance?
I think it's a combination of all these things, but it's mostly a political project which is being undertaken to create a divide or project this divide between Hindus and Muslims. So it's a whether it comes from the deep hatred for Muslims or it's a intolerance of certain kind of cultural norms. I think this is very difficult to point it out. But what has come now, particularly since the last 5-6 years, it's a very clear-cut political project which is implemented from the top, and people, those who are part of this process, are implementing it. So whatever you call it, it is a very open hostility towards the Muslims. That's what it is.
Thank you, Dr. Swain. Absolutely spot on. This is also something which has been noted by the media. Let's go look at some media files and then we can come back to the question answer session.
In fact, it has been the largest producer of films for over a decade. In 2018 alone, there were 1,800 digital feature films released in the country. The US, by contrast, only released 500 that year. When patriotism takes the disguise of nationalism and is blanketed in a well-made movie, it becomes an extremely powerful propaganda tool to attack minority communities. The systematic distortion of Islam and Muslims in the Bollywood industry is no longer a minor irritant that can be ignored. The Prime Minister's Hindu nationalist government has cast 200 million Muslims as internal enemies.
Thank you for staying with us, Dr. Swain. Now, the adverse reaction of individuals, organizations, or governments to unfavorable media content, how does this drive narrative in the Bollywood industry?
I think we need to look at the Bollywood because usually people try to confuse the kind of reactions we find it from the Hollywood towards authoritarianism, towards intolerance, that we don't see it in Bollywood. But we have to look at in the context that Hollywood is a very professionally organized business or venture, while in Bollywood it's a number of wage. The black money works, all sorts of wage, which are not exactly the right kind of things which are a business supposed to do. So there is a possibility of authority to interfere. So they are scared of political leadership. And so political leadership, particularly those who want to really put the pressure on the Bollywood actors or the stars, they easily do it. But of course, some of them don't really take part in it. But there is a large sections, either by force or willingly, because of course there are certain parts which wants to take the advantage of this, so they are willingly taking part of it. But there are also a section of the Bollywood actors and stars, they are being easily or forcibly manipulated or forced by the political leadership to take the stance or to use the social media, use their movie mediums, use their political standing to express opinions which will be looked at anti-Muslims.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swain. It was very nice to have you again on the show. And you're right about the social media part. So our viewers, please stay with us and look at our social media update regarding what people are saying. And then we can come back to the show.
Mahwash Ajaz believes Bollywood has normalized and encouraged Islamophobia, especially in the past 2 years. Kenneth Roth claims Bollywood is representing the Indian government's Islamophobic policies. Bollywood should be careful about the consequences of portraying the Indian Muslims as terrorists, invading barbarians and villains. Islamophobia in Hollywood and Bollywood has harmed the Muslim communities.
Bollywood has become one of the victims of anti-Muslim policy, which is represented by the actions of the Modi government. Some say that media is now being used as a tool by the establishment for the brainwashing of the masses. Critics say that Bollywood producers, directors and actors are either accused of deliberately cozying up to the right-wing nationalist narrative to increase their fan base, or they are forced into doing so in order to avoid criticism and loss of fan base.
The mood of Indian cinema has always been synonymous with the political atmosphere of the country. Patriotism rules Indian cinema, and the movie makers avoid raising issues that may not run parallel to official policy for the fear of flack from the government, pressure groups and citizens. A negative reaction from the government would have adverse and huge economic implications for the film industry. Being a soft power weapon, Bollywood keenly filters the content of its blockbusters to accommodate state ideology. This is because its commercial economic interests are intertwined with the political interests of the Indian state. The synergistic relationship between Bollywood and the Indian government has repeatedly exploited the appeal of the culture industry to propagate state-sponsored ideology at national and international levels. Worth $2.4 billion, Bollywood, being one of the largest media industries in the world, has worked closely with the government to avoid flack. And in return, it harvests tangible economic benefits such as tax cuts and soft loans and grants for productions. Data and statistics provided by government and its agencies are considered valid and accurate sources of information and often appear in films. The role of ideology as a content filter is particularly relevant to the Bollywood's portrayal of Indo-Pak relations.
Despite all of this, most Bollywood superstars either remained silent or they were shunned when they spoke up against the persecution of Muslims. And this includes the famous Khans of Bollywood. Even though movies have been produced to counter this Islamophobic narrative in Bollywood, such films are not only rare, but from before the time when the Hindu nationalist BJP government took power. It is only scary to think where the future lies because of the increasing intolerance and hate against Muslims in India.
Over the past few years, there has been a commercialization of nationalism marketed through advertisements, films, TV shows and other media. The Indian film industry plays a significant role in shaping young minds and propagating certain political narratives. With its large fan base and encouragement from the BJP, it contributes heavily to the normalization of hate politics and the promotion of Hindu hyper-nationalism. The film and entertainment industry has been laying the groundwork for acceptance of Islamophobia for many years. Many films that don't follow the political ideology have lost their budget for productions. Often Bollywood is largely silenced, as many actors have been harassed for voicing any criticism. There have been efforts to neutralize and counter negative stereotyping caused by Islamophobia in Bollywood, even in TV shows such as Kubul Hai. Films like Main Hoon Na, My Name is Khan, Kabul Express, New York, Well Done Abba or Agent Vinod have tried to show a different side to the stereotyping of Muslims in different ways, and have tried to humanize the Muslim, so dehumanized by the rest of the cinematic world. The global success of these films only work to highlight the fact that even films that do not pander to stereotypes can be big hits.
For more on this issue, we have another guest with us, Mr. Fawaz Shaheen, who is a researcher with the Quill Foundation. Mr. Shaheen, welcome to the show. Many people believe that as an influential industry, Bollywood has not only not countered the anti-Islamic narrative, but has even fueled the Islamophobia which is prevalent today. What do you think?
Certainly in the last few years, there has been a surge of Bollywood's portrayal of Islamophobic tropes, and while there have been historically Bollywood's portrayal of Muslims has been problematic, but in the last 5-10 years the biggest tool of Islamophobic tropes has been the historical fiction, the periodic films as they're known. So typically in a movie, for instance, say in 2016-17, we had this movie called Padmavat, which was on a ruler of the Khilji dynasty and a Rajput ruler. Last year we had a similar movie. There are many movies like that which have come up where there is typically a Muslim ruler who is portrayed as an invader or a conqueror, and typically the Muslim ruler will be unnecessarily cruel and bloodthirsty and will be wearing dark clothes and a typical villain. And the Indian Hindu ruler would be a Rajput or a Maratha or whatever, and they would be portrayed as the defender, as somebody who's defending the honor of the women and somebody who's defending the motherland, brave, etc., etc. And of course, it is a distortion and extreme oversimplification of medieval Indian history. But much more than a misrepresentation of historical fact, this actually feeds into a narrative. This narrative built by Hindutva historians that India had a golden period of Hindu rulers, which was disrupted by Muslim invaders and then British Christian invaders, and then now that we've been liberated, we need to we need to bring back the era of golden period of Hindu rulers. So that trope, that narrative of Hindutva historians is repeatedly reinforced by Bollywood's portrayal in these historical period films. That's what's been the most dominant trope of Islamophobia in the last few years.
This narrative which you talk about, do you think there's a connection of this with foreign direct investment? Do you think that this investment which is coming into India is somehow promoting certain types of narratives or otherwise?
See, this is a more difficult question. Certainly, India has one of the most liberal foreign direct investment regimes in media and entertainment. There is 100% FDI allowed, and you don't need prior approval from the foreign trade investment body, regulatory bodies, to invest in films in India. And all the major Hollywood players, Disney is in India, Fox is in India, DreamWorks is in India, all the major Hollywood players are here. And while it's difficult to draw a direct line, certainly the portrayal of Muslim as terrorist, it existed before 2001 when the foreign direct investment norms were loosened. But since then, it has only increased, and it's almost become an industry of its own. Military movies earlier would try to include a Muslim character on the Indian side just to soften it up. But in recent years, you've had very much this portrayal of Muslim terrorists. But much more than FDI, I would have to say, much more than FDI, it is the rise of India's right wing, not just in elections, not just in power, but also in popular culture and imagination. As right wing ideas have gotten more acceptance, there is a market for movies where Muslims are portrayed as villain, and movies that run counter to this. We've had many movies that actually tried to give the other narrative. Typically, they haven't been as successful as the other movies. So certainly the market has been leading filmmakers to produce more movies where Muslims are portrayed as gangsters, terrorists, or these period films which I was talking about, which have given the biggest, in fact now one of the surest formulas to success in a Bollywood movie is a period film that has a typical Hindu ruler as the hero and a Muslim ruler portrayed as the invader/villain. So that is very popular. So much more than FDI, it is the rise of India's Hindutva right wing in politics as well as in public perception and imagination and in popular culture that has given rise to Islamophobic portrayals in Bollywood.
Some very interesting dynamics to it. We have some detailed media projections over this issue as well. Let's look at some media coverages and then we can come back to the question answer session.
Following the glorious tradition of Hollywood, India's Bollywood has also been churning out the similar apocalyptic fare for some years now. 15 days before the shoot, Mrinal Dar called to say that funding had stopped because the investors didn't want to put money into a film about a Muslim family. Ms. Pardakuna appeared at JNU only days before the release of her film Chap Haq, prompting figures within the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party to call for a boycott. Producer Gul Khan says, with Kubal High, I want to remove misconceptions regarding Islam in the minds of people.
Thank you, Mr. Shaheen, for staying with us. Where do you think the line should be drawn between entertainment and freedom of speech?
See, this is, I don't think that you really need to draw that much of a line. In fact, the problem in India is not entertainment industry spewing Islamophobic tropes because of a lot of freedom of expression. In fact, it's the opposite. What we've seen, Indian filmmakers and film stars are terribly hesitant to voice any opinions that run contrary to popular perceptions, popular ideas. And we've seen that whenever Bollywood actors have tried to voice political opinions, their movies have suffered. When making historical periodical films, you will often see that small fringe vigilante groups will come up that will take offense on behalf of some historic Hindu clan or a Rajput clan or a Maratha clan, and they will create a ruckus and they will threaten to disrupt the screening of the movies. So that sort of atmosphere where there is a lot of social pressure, often violent pressure on filmmakers, and there is a lot of money at stake. In fact, it has curbed freedom of expression, and much more than anything the government could do. It is this unchecked vigilante violence and the threat of vigilante violence which leads Indian filmmakers to a lot of self-censorship, and which has prodded them to churn out cinema that portrays Muslims in a particularly bad light. And there is, I mean, even if you see historically, Bollywood, even up to the 70s and 80s, Bollywood had many positive portrayals of Muslims, but those positive portrayals were also in line with the nationalist nation-building project, where the good Muslim would always be not mainstream. The good Muslim would always be other. They would always be recognizable from their distinct clothes, from their distinct language and mannerisms, and they would typically, apart from being devout Muslims, they would also go to shrines and Hindu temples, and generally they would show acceptance of Hindu culture, or Hindu culture which was portrayed as a mainstream Indian culture. So that has always been problematic. That has always been a part of Bollywood's trope of the portrayal of Indian Muslims. Despite the existence of some very good cinema around Indian Muslims and problems of Indian Muslims, mainstream Bollywood has always portrayed Muslims as some sort of an other, someone who is distinct from Indian society. And in the last few years, the pressure of Hindutva politics has prodded Bollywood filmmakers in a certain direction. So in fact, Islamophobia in Indian movies is a result of a lack of freedom of expression and self-censorship, much more than anything the state has done itself.
Thank you, Mr. Shaheen, for your detailed answers. It was nice having you with us. Now, we would like to see the comments that people are making online with regards to Islamophobia in Bollywood, and please stay with us so that we can come back to the show.
Arti T.Q. Singh believes that all of those who have been somehow provoking protesters must be penalized. The mukbang criticizes the silence of the Muslim Bollywood stars in a pretty harsh way. Sayani Gupta asked some of the stars to condemn the act of police brutality and violence against the students. Swati Chaturvedi describes the selfie of Khans with Prime Minister Modi as taming of the Khans.
With this, we sign off this episode. You can follow us on our social media platforms to stay updated, and we'll meet the same time, same day next week. Thanks for watching.